And we have our panelists already in studio today. Remember, it is Thursday. We talk about the state of economy, but let's also see how that really stands with the business environment in the country as well. How does politics also affect our environment when we are trying to transact our business? And of course, I had mentioned to you our panelists earlier, but I'll just remind you who we are having in studio today. We have with us Honorable Nderitu Muriithi, who is an economist and also a former Assistant Minister in the Ministry of Industrialization. We have Mike Eldon, who is a management consultant. Also, we do have with us Gabriel Negatu, who is the Director General, East Africa Regional Development Business Delivery Office of the African Development Bank. And also, we have with us Kiprono, who is the Chair of Kenya Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We're eagerly waiting for Aly-Khan Satchu as well, who's the CEO of Rich Management. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning. Morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
There's no tea in your cup, or I can serve you if there's nothing. Right? Okay, let's just focus on where we are the last 2 weeks. Very heightened political environment it has been. And, of course, we have Honorable Nderitu Muriithi, who is also an economist, but also running for governorship seat in Laikipia.
Yes.
Let's hear from you. What really happened in your area? We had this contentious Jubilee party as well. We have 500 cases so far at the Jubilee Tribunal office as well. What is your fate?
Well, first of all, I was declared winner last night, which... Last evening. At about 8, I think.
So, and he didn't call a press conference that evening.
No, I think the tribunal did address the press just before 7 p.m. Last evening on the issue. Yes, it's been a busy week for the tribunal, arbitrating various disputes. In Laikipia specifically, we had results from Laikipia North in respect of the governorship that were under serious contention because in some places, or in a number of places in the north, we had more votes than electors. So the tribunal found that they had to throw out the result.
So what was the bane of the contention?
Well, simply that there had been tampering, there had been, and the local board, the county elections board, reported that the returning officer responsible for the north had interfered with the results. They had amended some numbers to favor the incumbent. And that is how you ended up with more votes or more purported votes than you have electors in stations like Labal, in stations like Waso and so on. So what the board did was to throw out those inflated numbers, and the result of which, of course, is that I emerged winner.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so looking at how the exercise was carried out, both from Jubilee Party and ODM and other parties as well, do you think it was fair?
Well, there's no doubt that the nomination processes for all these parties, have many challenges. Because remember, it is literally like running a general election, and the parties themselves are weak organizations. So there were many challenges, but I think that on the whole, the parties have attempted to do a credible job. And for that, I think we should congratulate them. But without a doubt, there are challenges, and there have been challenges in the various areas, ranging from particular logistics, moving things around, getting ballots to voters on time, supervising the process in a free and credible manner. So those challenges are without a doubt there. But on the whole, I think the parties have done well this time around.
All right. Mike Eldon, your observation?
It's been blanket coverage by the media of every ward 24/7. To the extent that I understand that we were meant to be on last week, but
of course we had
no time for an economic outlook when you're when you're worrying day to day and minute to minute. Primaries are interesting phenomena all over the world, and we see in America, for instance, that who votes in primaries? It's the most ardent, the most passionate, the most active, the most extreme. And who voted here in the primaries? I have the sense that it was a lot of people who really weren't that busy and could afford the time, never mind many of them challenged to do it twice. So when you have people who are less occupied with work, disproportionately influencing election outcomes or candidate outcomes, that has certain consequences, maybe good, maybe bad, but it is a very strange tilting factor, the differentiated voting group. The other one is that I understand that there has not been a consistency of registers as who is eligible to vote in these primaries. And IEBC is not involved, their information isn't always available, and it does lead one to ask, what should IEBC's role be next time round in the primaries? I was at an event yesterday, a consultative forum between IEBC and the private sector, where this thing came up. And I have to say, by the way, that all those who spoke to us from IEBC were very impressive people who seemed to be very conscientious, very diligent about their job, confident, too confident, who knows, but it's something that was talked about, the need for more regulation of primaries next time round.
All right. Maybe we had also an international observer appointing Gabriel Negatu to tell us, yeah, what did you observe as an international observer, so to speak, in quotes?
Actually, I was out of the country last week, but what I monitored, even from wherever I was the level of violence that could have happened, but didn't. And I think, to me, the biggest story of this, regardless of who was elected and who was not, was that Kenya has come of age. Kenya has matured. Kenyans have politically matured to the point where, yes, you can have disputes, 500 cases with Jubilee, and I don't know what number is on the other side, but it's being handled in a civil, organized, and systematic way. So this establishes Kenya as a country of laws and institutions, and when you have grievances, there are recourses that you can take, and I think that has to be the biggest story. There will always be some fringes on both sides that may not go right, but in the main, I think the process went well. Small skirmishes here and there, but no major disruption, and I expect we will see a repeat of this during the general election. Yeah.
All right. No major disruption, he thinks. Of course, we had a person dying. We had also people being abducted and people being kidnapped. And I know Chair Kiprono, Kittony, of course, also Kenya Chamber of Commerce with other private sectors as well. You're coming up with a very salutary effort to make sure that we observe peace as we're getting up towards general election. Also with the peace caravan and looking out to the leaders to sign, peace pledges in the country. You will tell us, in light of that and what has been happening, do you think as we're headed towards general election, we will have peace?
Debarl, thank you very much. First of all, allow me to congratulate my friend Nderitu for bagging the Jubilee nomination. I think that's laudable. And he's, of course, a very well-respected economist. And I think he's really been given an opportunity to put his economics to practice in Laikipia, which is one of the most fascinating counties in Kenya. I take a very positive view about what has just happened. I think that, like Gabriel says, Kenya has come of age. If you look at us vis-a-vis even our neighbors, I mean, this process that we've just gone through, it could be quite uncomfortable for us in the business community because there's a fair amount of disruption. And there is a narrative going around that every year there is an election, we lose 1.5% of GDP. But I think that we really are demonstrating that Kenyans are acutely aware of their civic responsibilities. People are coming out, they're participating, and outcomes are being announced on a daily basis. And I'm very confident that should IEBC deliver on what they said they will deliver on, then August 8th will be yet another day for Kenya to celebrate the gains of democracy. And I want to say also that, you know, we are definitely moving in the right direction as a country, and democracy has taken root. But I would hope that in the next election that we have in Kenya, we'll see political parties driven by ideology and not just as vehicles for people to get elected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Let's also focus on the issue of independent candidates as well, because now this is a very unlikely scenario that we've been thrown in as a country. We have almost 1,380 people who now are actually seeking tickets to run as independents, first of all. And maybe, Honorable Nderitu, had you not been given this ticket last evening, because you're eagerly waiting to see the outcome of it, would you have run as an independent? And what would have been the challenges that you will have faced maybe as an independent? Because this is what now most of independents will be facing.
Oh, I can tell you, as we waited for several days for the decision of the tribunal, many of my supporters did urge me to consider that option. But I think and I agree with the Chairman Kiprono that the direction we need to be going is one where parties are based on ideology. Unfortunately, up to now, our parties have tended to be, shall I say, vehicles of convenience. And every election cycle, we have new vehicles. And if you ask, is there any difference, for example, in terms of economic blueprint between the major contestants or contending parties, you may find that the manifestos are by and large fairly similar. So in looking into the future, what we want to see is parties where it is more driven by ideology, not just a question of where from the country, which region you're from. We want to see parties where their policy options that they will put on the table are a little bit more predictable, because we know their ideological stance. Right now, if you ask, okay, what do you expect? I mean, like the issues you say we are going to debate today, on debt, for example.
Yes.
Where do various parties, what can you expect of them? What do they think is the best trajectory for growing this economy and so on? You will not find so much difference. And I think that is the next phase in terms of our development. But look, we are in a good place. We're in a good place. And overall, we are headed in the right direction. If you look at Ernst & Young, there is a report in the Business Daily. Kenya is ranked second after Morocco for being best for investments. And why is it best? Because of the longer term. Their view is that, or the view of foreign direct investment is that Kenya has a very good long-term trajectory. So I think we are in a good place. What we ought to do is simply invest more in terms of building their political parties.
Mike Eldon, you think you're in a good place, going by what we see, the hyperinflation right now? How much is a packet of milk right now?
Well, just hold on to the inflation a bit, because I also want to comment on the independent one.
Okay, the independent, yes.
And it's interesting, I was in Malawi last week, where about half the MPs are independent. When they get elected, some of them sidle up to the government party in the hope of bringing more development, etc. But I understand it's not all that obvious that that'll happen, even if they do that. So half the people there are independent. If you look at what's happening in France today, Macron, who's the likely winner on Sunday, he's virtually an independent. and a vehicle for, yes, his personal views and like-minded people, but he doesn't have a big party machine around him. And soon, in June, they'll have the parliamentary elections, and how will all that map out? And for the counties in particular, if you would have stood and won as an independent, what would your relationship have been with MCAs who will have been affiliated to one party or another? And would that have been significant or not? How have governors today been building relationships with MCAs? And of course, it's not always in the most glorious ways, given the nature of many of the MCAs. But there are these interesting dynamics, I think, of independence. And if we see some emerge, it'll be interesting to observe how they fare.
Well, you see, I think the emergence of that independent whatever phenomena will in fact force parties, or certainly I hope it will force parties to up their game in terms of being attractive. Because as a candidate, then one has a choice to do it within a political party or to go as an independent. You ask what challenges. Obviously, if you are in a party, you have hopefully a support system and other things like that that aid you along. But as an independent, then you are also free of certain things that parties of necessity impose, including, for example, the nomination process, which can be quite an expensive and trying affair.
Experientially, do we learn anything from Ethiopia compared to where Kenya is? You say, yeah, with an advanced democracy, where is it Ethiopia in terms also of democracy?
Completely different systems. Completely different systems. Electoral system there is, yeah, you do have several parties, but very much based on ideological platforms and very deep ideological platforms. But like Kenya, there is very little room for real independent parties. I mean, you are concerned that there are 1,300 or so people who are likely to register as run as independents, but don't worry about that figure because the cost of running will eliminate many of these people. By default, they will be eliminated. There's what you call barrier to entry. It's not official, but the cost of running an effective campaign and for a governor position, you will be eliminated. So that's, but in Ethiopia as well, the cost of running as an independent is quite high, but it's rather a different system, and the political, there is a lot of political maturity in Ethiopia, but the democratic culture is new and still taking roots. It has some challenges. It's a bigger country, bigger population. Kenya, I mean, Ethiopia is 3-4 times the size of Kenya, just in terms of population.
So your party is actually predicated on ideologies?
Yeah, very much on ideology. Yeah.
But we, compared to our parties in the country,
yeah.
Kiprono, what do you think? Do we have ideologies?
First of all, you asked Gabriel, I must say, rather tricky question. You almost threw him under the bus. Because, he still has to fly back to Addis Ababa. So I like the way he answered that question very diplomatically by not answering it. But I want to say that for me, the advent of independent candidates is also largely motivated by the remuneration that we give our political class, the direct access to resources. And I think as a country, given our level of development, we really need to start to address that issue. Because historically, I mean, people went to politics to serve. But today, we are actually finding a situation where the entire political class are remunerated far better than even the private sector. And I think it's something we need to redress, because that's a lot of those resources should actually be going to development of the country, not remunerating people in the political class. So when you see people going to become independents, of course they are up against the larger political parties that are also fairly, thin on the ground in terms of ideological underpinning.
It must go along, though, with the voter stopping seeing them as ATMs.
Exactly, exactly. And it's also, it takes two to tango. I mean, the voters also make a high demand of them in terms of cash. But I haven't seen a real deliberate effort to demonetize our political environment. I mean, it is just far too highly monetized, where the highest, you know, the person with the biggest war chest has a very high chance, even as an independent. And for me, I think really the voters need to start showing some principle by voting along an ideological ground. And I think that's something we need to do as a country, to civically educate our people.
Civically educate our people. Yeah. Right. We want, in a moment also, we'll hear how also the financial market has been doing, especially with the foreign exchange reserve, which has actually gone up, looking fairly good. And of course, also listening to the Capital Markets Authority, it says that the business environment is very good. And this is where we want also to drop in Aly-Khan, who's the CEO of Rich Management and also financial analyst. Kenya foreign exchange reserve looking up?
They've been high for quite a while, actually. I think import cover is about 6 months. These are the highest reserves we've ever had since independence, in point of fact, in part because of support from some multilateral agencies like the IMF. But from the FX cover point of view, we're in a strong place. And that's why the shilling is so well behaved and moves about 50 cents throughout the year, and everyone gets excited when it moves 60 cents. But, you know, it's so stable. And I think that's really in part because of that.
And we thought maybe that given period, the 2 weeks that we had with the primaries that were ongoing, the shilling will get spooked. It's amazing that it remains steady.
The tolerance levels for noise are quite high as it is, I think. You know, we've been through a number of scenarios which haven't been great, and you know, the shilling's behaved well in that situation. So for now, I think investors are looking through the noise, thinking, you know, this is just the noise that comes with or this kind of contestation. But obviously, if it gets a lot worse, Debarl, then you know, all bets are off. But for now, the shilling is comfortable in a comfort zone. And is expected to hang around here, 103.
But looking at your crystal ball as we're heading towards general election, and in light of this, can we look at it as a harbinger of where we're going to the general election with the primaries and it remaining steady?
Yes, I think as long as we don't have, you know, a sort of 207, 208 scenario, then the shilling is going to be very steady. It's very binary, isn't it, really? I mean, it will stay steady until the moment it doesn't, and then you'll probably get quite an asymmetric move, potentially. That's the risk with something like the shilling.
Right, but what is really amazing is, I don't know, sort of it looks like an oxymoron that we have a steady shilling, we have economy which is very robust, but I don't know how they call it. You're the economist, you can tell us. This is a growth economy, but it's not really reflecting back to the common mwananchi. Reflecting back to the unga, reflecting back to the sugar.
21% food price inflation year on year. This is the problem, because the common person is spending a much greater percentage of their salary on food. A food move of that nature is going to make everybody worse off. This happened in 2011 and it's happening again now. The market is looking through it and saying, actually, it's all a food-related, weather-related situation, and we'll look through it. But the person on the ground is feeling it. I mean, if you imagine you're spending 500 shillings on food every month, and now you're having to spend 20% extra, that's now 600 shillings. That 100 shillings makes you feel poor, and that's a fact. And I think, you know, we can't avoid it, and we've got to look at it for what it is at the moment. Tremendous pressure on the common person on the ground in Kenya.
All right, Mike, you hold with this view?
Well, yes. I mean, we have to distinguish between cycles and trends, between the short term and the long term. And I think that in this day and age where there is such intense news coverage and news analysis minute by minute, it's hard to stretch one's discussion to the level that we always have it at here. And that's why it's good that at least from 6 to 8 in the morning once a month, we are here to look beyond the 24-hour news cycle. and beyond the pure politics. So it is weather-related, and it is cyclical, therefore, and yet it doesn't need to be quite so weather-related. And as we've talked about here, and of course others do, we need to become more weather resilient, and with irrigation and with all sorts of other ways of raising agricultural productivity, and doing a better job on storing food and import-export balance of food. These are the challenges of management that enable people to dampen supply and demand imbalances, and hence major fluctuations in prices. Does the voter get interested in all of this? It seems not. And to the extent that they do, they'd rather hear simplistic Trump-Le Pen type explanations than the sort of erudite stuff we get around here.
But isn't that going to be a huge problem politically, globally? And I'm seeing this where you've got this populism, which is saying one thing, but is not able to deliver what it's trying to deliver. On the other side, you've got really suboptimal policy making, and I put a lot of people in this category. I mean, Trump, for example, President Zuma, things that are happening in South Africa, where you've got this whole black empowerment thing, but it's not doing what it says it's going to do on the ticket. It's empowering a few people, and this has been the case for many years. My worry is, how long does it take for the voter, for the epiphany to happen in the voter's mind, and it's globally, and realize, goodness, we've been sold a snake oil, and let's get serious and really debate it for what it is. And I think
they should ask us.
There you go.
But yeah, I think something is happening. Yeah, in the country.
The civic education you mentioned, that's exactly what's going to make it happen.
But civic education has been happening, and a lot of it has been very good. But at the moment of putting your tick in the voter box, that gets switched off, because the voter has become more educated as to who will be the better leader, but they don't vote for that person.
They just want to change in some cases.
I think let's call a spade a spade.
Yes.
Some people have lost the job, and some balls have been dropped. And the reason I say that is we are certainly not today a production-led, employment-led economy. In fact, if we look at today, the Kenyan economy, a lot of industries are shedding jobs in media, in manufacturing, in banking. They absolutely zero focus, very, very little focus on job creation. Okay, a few days ago, we see the president announcing an increment on minimum 18%. Wage. I don't know how far that has been interrogated in terms of whether or not business can absorb that minimum wage increase. I mean, what are we saying about our own production costs and ability to deliver goods and services at globally competitive prices? Then look at production. I mean, are we a production-led economy? How many of our people, what percentage of our population are involved in productive activity? If you look at agriculture, very little extension services, hardly any intervention. And if you look at the legal and regulatory environment, there's a lot of instability. I mean, I'm in gaming and other industries. We see one policy today, another one next month, a lot of extortion from Parliament where there should be solutions. So actually, I think largely, our policy environment has not been stable enough to guarantee, that economic growth that directly impacts on the well-being of the people.
Here is a view from a practicing politician. Look.
Yes.
Now, take what happened this week with the calls for cheaper unga, in fact, during Labor Day. And of course, you're quite right, Ali is quite right, that the citizen, the poor citizen, is suffering. That a movement of 100 bob, if your income is 500, is a very, very significant. Question is, what really is actually the policy solution? What is the policy choice? So we go back to the food basket and say, what is it? What are the foods that are actually available? Now, we have remained in grain. We have remained in maize and wheat. And we know, historically, we've not been very good at producing maize and wheat. We have remained with the wheat on the sensitive list, which means it comes at a 60, I don't know, 60% in duty, import duty, yet we import more than 80–90% of our wheat requirement. So the solution is a very serious policy solution. It may not present itself in terms of bringing votes to the table, particularly in an election year like this one, and also the lobby. Because you say, okay, who grows wheat in Kenya? Why is it that this grain has remained on the sensitive list? I mean, how do you explain that? And remember, because we end up with expensive wheat, we end up with expensive feeds, so our chicken, our eggs, and so on, and it works its way through the supply chain. So the question is, why is the political class unable, unwilling to remove wheat from the sensitive list? Number two, there are crops indigenous to Kenya. I would say something like managu. In fact, the government, you know, we had a program called Orphan Crops, and I think it should have been called differently. Now, these are crops like millet and sorghums, amaranthus, managu, stinging nettle, crops that are indigenous of Kenya, where we have an absolute advantage, and therefore we are more cost effective in producing them, and we should see the agricultural research people and other systems focusing on those crops and away from this high cost grain circumstance that we keep focused on.
Right. All right.